Welcome back, everybody. We're doing another debunking. There was some things on the last debunking that I was a little confused on. I didn't want to go back and rewatch the whole thing. I just remembered a few things. So if there's some more stuff, throw it down in the comments, and I'll get around to looking into that. But there was at least a couple of things that I was looking up that I wanted to get to. They were talking about the Roman and the medieval warming periods. One guy was talking about, which are definitely things. They exist. I've looked them up. He made it. Let's see. It was a climate change debunking video. So he didn't really say this, and they usually don't say it outright so that you can't say, well, you lied and said blah, blah, blah. But people know that if you give somebody enough information, they will fill in the rest of the information. It's done a lot so that we can kind of get through things quicker. You know what I mean? If you're saying, hey, blah, blah, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Then we could skip that part and go straight to what might be more interesting or more relevant. Sometimes you can't skip it because you don't know what the hell they're talking about. So you got to go through that and learn it. So I think this is just kind of inherent in language, where if something is kind of understood, or you feel that you understand it, whether it's actually true or not, that we kind of just end up skipping it or filling in the gaps. So despite the fact that he did not say there were these warming periods, and therefore warming is just a normal thing, and this whole global warming thing is BS because warming happens normally. So I looked it up, and I've got it right here, the data. It never really gets much above, say, 0.3 degrees Celsius above normal mean temperature. So I think normal is 14 degrees Celsius. I believe that that's what I'd heard at some point. So we're talking 16, 17 degrees Celsius, where 14 is the normal, right? We talk about 2 degrees Celsius and 3, and 14 is way bigger than that, right? But 14 is what we're at normally. And when we say 2 or 3, we're talking about 2 or 3 difference, not 2 or 3 total. I'm sure most people understand that, but just for the few people who are like, wait a minute, all I do is pay attention to the numbers every once in a while. The numbers are confusing now. I believe 14 is just the normal. It's what we consider 0 when we talk about the difference of 2 degrees Celsius. We're starting at 14. We're not starting at 0. Otherwise, you'd have a chart that always had this huge jump up to 14, and then it looks weird. So we just average is 14, so that's where we're aiming for. Average is where we should be. We don't want to really get around up or below that very far. So the Roman, which was a little warmer than the medieval, none of them really got above 0.3 degrees Celsius higher. That's 0.3, not 3, not 2, 0, less than 1.3 degrees Celsius. And then they had the Ice Age, what they called the Little Ice Age, and that dipped down to a whole 0.4. That's it. That's the Ice Age. I believe that the Ice Age is actually a real Ice Age, not this mini one, has gotten pretty far down, like maybe 6 or 7. I can't remember the number. It was like 6 or 7, I thought, below the normal. So pretty cold, way colder than we've ever been in. I'll get to this in a second. What would be, this gentleman calls the corridor of life, I believe is what he calls it. I looked up that term. It's probably something new that he's kind of saying, and so it hasn't really caught on because I didn't really find any websites referring to it, and I didn't want to watch through those videos again either, even though I liked them and they were good. And I'll mention the gentleman's name so you can look it up yourself. But he was talking about the research that he had done, and not the temperature research, because that was already, he didn't do that, but he was just looking at the data and extrapolating a hypothesis. and that the data was going back to, kind of when humans were really like a thing, and life was really doing its best, if you will. And that was that it never really went above 2 degrees Celsius, even back in prehistoric times. Now, we don't mean ever. Again, like I said, this was really when hominids were really kind of coming to fruition in their dominance of the planet. I don't know if it went much before that, how far back it just went, but I know, human civilization and just humans kind of in general, that this goes back at least to that, in that we've really been the dominant species and been able to thrive and survive at temperatures that never got, I think, was above 2 and maybe even below 2, because ice age is not good either. Like, an ice age is also bad, but obviously we've survived ice ages. So I think he has that in his calculations. I just don't remember. But this was a corridor that he called the corridor of life, when you look at historically what the temperature range is that we've really kind of survived in. And so this guy talking about the Roman and the medieval warming period, we're well within this sort of corridor of life and are nothing even close to what we're getting now. So he was bringing it up as if somehow that like helps prove his point, and it does not. But I looked into it because he'd mentioned it, and I did not know what he was talking about. It's always nice to know these sort of straw man arguments that they come up with and be armed with the information, so when they bring it up again, you know what the hell they're talking about. So that is that. And I had a couple of pages with that, but the second page really had everything the first one did. The first one was just more focused on, I think, the medieval one, and the other one had a little bit more. But the labels and everything weren't quite as good, so kind of extrapolated between the two to get the best information from both. But it was the same chart, essentially, with the data points. So this gentleman is Johann Rockstrom, with the 2 dots above the O. I can't remember what that's called when they have the 2 dots up. I know I've heard it, but I don't remember. So if you know, go ahead and write it in the comments or whatever. Not that it's essential. I looked it up in Google because I just typed it in, and I'm not all that good with the alt characters, so I didn't put the 2 dots and knew exactly who I was talking about. Sorry, coffee. We'll wait for this car. So I had to go 45 and a 25 mile hour residential. Jesus. Okay. So Johann Rockstrom. That's who we're talking about here. Jesus, so much saliva right now. Okay, so those guys are the ones I wanted to talk about on here. Before, I've turned the volume all the way up. It doesn't get any louder, so I hope it's louder than it was before when we watched these videos. But this is on a site called Possum Kicker. So that's already, obviously this person is a great dude, right? He kicks possums. What a wonderful human being. The video says it's called Global Climate Change Scam / Global Warming Hoax, exclamation point by Greenpeace co-founder, I think something. It goes on, but you'd be able to find it just with that stuff. So let's take a listen and see. Again, I have not watched any of these. Like that first one was just a satire. I didn't know because I do not watch these. I always could have edited it out, but I let them have their moment. It was only a couple of moments. Why not? So let's watch this and see what they have to say. Fast forward it because I don't need any copyright stuff on whatever freaking music that is. So I'm going to delete all that crap so I don't get copyright strikes for that music and any more music that just pops in. We're just going to start from here.
The salmon spawning streams in the rainforest until I was sent off to Vancouver to boarding school, eventually finding myself at the University of British Columbia, studying the life sciences, biology, biochemistry, genetics, a little forestry. And then in the mid-1960s, before the word was known to the general public, I discovered the science of ecology, the science of how all things are interrelated and how people are related to them. And in the mid-1960s, at the height of the Vietnam War, the height of the Cold War, and the threat of all-out nuclear war, and the growing concern for the environment, I was transformed into a radical environmental activist. I can't seem to get it to go that way anymore.
I'm going to actually, I don't want to have the neighbors complaining about it, so I'll turn it down a little bit. I'm just going to see if I can't move the mic. You might hear me a little bit less. I'm sure that'll be happy for some people. I'm just going to move the mic closer, and maybe that'll solve the issue.
I found myself in a church basement with a like-minded group planning a protest voyage against U.S. hydrogen bomb testing in Alaska. We proved that a somewhat ragtag-looking bunch, that's me under the P in 71, could sail a leaky old halibut boat across the North Pacific.
Okay, so this does not exclude anything, but the first red flag for me is he said he was part of a church group. So to me, this already colors his ideology in a way that he's going to be predisposed to want to go more of the way of the deniers, who have their ideological agendas, as opposed to the atheists who just are listening to the facts and just understand, okay, this is a fact. I don't have a specific ideology I'm trying to accomplish. So you could definitely be a part of a church group or any religion and still believe that climate change is real and man's doing it and all that stuff. So I don't want to discount that, because there's all sorts of people out there, right? All I want is to be fair and say that's definitely a red flag for me, and to me that means that they could end up being skewed a certain particular way, and that it already seems like they are because of the title of their video and everything. And to me, that is kind of a first warning for me that makes sense where they ended up. But let's listen and see what they have to say.
Help galvanize public opposition to the tests and change the course of history. That turned out to be the last hydrogen bomb the United States ever detonated. President Nixon canceled the remaining tests in the series due to the overwhelming opposition we had spearheaded.
I don't know if that's true. I don't know if this was a Greenpeace. It seemed to me that some of the videos I watched said that there was a lot of international pressure to just stop bombing the crap out of everybody, just to test your bombs. To me, that seems like what I had heard, which makes a lot more sense than, hey, we were hippies and Greenpeace and look what we got done. Not to say that Greenpeace doesn't A, do anything good, or B, have an impact. I'm not saying either of those things. I'm saying I'm glad that they were against the nuclear bomb. I'm glad they were against blowing people up and just blowing islands up for no reason except to test the bomb. That's great. They were on the right side of that. I don't know that I don't know that they should actually have the credit that he's trying to give them here, though.
On our way back from Alaska, we were welcomed into the big house of the Namgis Nation at Alert Bay, near my northern Vancouver Island home, where they made us brothers of the tribe. For this began for Greenpeace the tradition of the warriors of the rainbow. It's after a Cree legend that says one day when the skies are black and the birds fall dead and the waters are poisoned, that people around the world will join together to save the earth. We named our ship the Rainbow Warrior, and I spent the next 15 years full-time on the front lines of the movement around the world.
Till they realized
Next,
it was
we
gay,
took on French atmospheric nuclear testing in the South Pacific. France was still detonating hydrogen atomic bombs in the air in the early 70s, sending radiation around the world. They were a little more difficult. It took some years to drive these nuclear tests underground. And as late as 1985, under direct orders from President Mitterrand, French commandos bombed and sank the Rainbow Warrior in Auckland Harbor, killing our photographer. Going back again to the 70s, here I am driving a small rubber boat into the first encounter with the Soviet factory whaling fleet in the North Pacific in 1975. We confronted the whalers, putting ourselves in front of their harpoons and our boats to protect the fleeing whales. This got us on television around the world, bringing the Save the Whales movement into everyone's living room for the first time.
So, I read you the title of the video. I think we all know where this is heading. But just as an aside, what are you doing, dude? Are you just trying to say, look, I really was deep into this whole nature thing and was an activist, and I changed my tune because I was wrong? Sorry, big gust of wind there. Wait till that's done in case it's being a little bit too loud on the mic, even with a wind filter. So, yeah, I don't know if he's just saying, hey, look at how pro-nature I was. So when I decided that this was BS, you should listen to me because I like nature. And if I like nature, that means I would automatically should believe in climate change if it was real, right? But I don't. So what does that tell you? I think that's where we're headed. But this is just a 3 minutes and 55 cents. 3 minutes and 55 seconds already of setup just to get to his point. So, yeah, okay. Let's keep going, buddy.
4 years later, factory whaling was banned in the North Pacific and eventually in all the world's oceans. Here I'm sitting on a baby seal off the east coast of Newfoundland to protect it from the Hunters Club. I was arrested and hauled off to jail. The seal was clubbed and skinned, but this picture appeared in over 3,000 newspapers around the world the next morning. This and many other direct actions eventually brought changes to the way Canada manages its seal herds. Anyways, by the mid-'80s, we'd grown from a church basement into a group with 100 million a year coming in and offices in 20 countries around the world. Presidents and prime ministers now spoke of the environment on a regular basis. But for me, it was time to make a change. I had been against at least 3 or 4 things every day of my life for 15 years. I decided it was time to try and figure out what I was in favor of for a change. I made the transition from the politics of confrontation, which is basically about telling people what they should stop doing, to the politics of trying to find consensus about what we should do instead. There is no escaping the fact that 7 billion people wake up every morning on this planet with real needs for food, energy, and materials. Sustainability, which for me was the next logical step after environmental activism, is partly about continuing to provide for those needs.
So, I guess he's trying to make the point that being an environmentalist and trying to save the whales isn't also about trying to make sure people are provided for, because how can we feed people if we're busy saving their food source and keeping them from getting food? That's not really how it works. There's plenty of food. We don't need to kill those whales. Most of them weren't even killed for food. They were killed for other resources. Especially back in the day, they were killed a lot for oil and blubber and just ambergris and all that crap. The seals, like they said, they were beating and skinning them, not eating them. So I'm glad that he went from telling people what not to do and going to telling them what they could do. Definitely not what they should do, but what they could do, I think, is better. You shouldn't be forcing anybody into one thing or the other. But saying, hey, let's focus on helping people instead of hurting people. I think that's the point he's trying to get across, even though he's not actually saying that with his actions that he's describing that he did. But I like that he's going to that focus. I don't like that he thinks the two are separate. And I'm not even sure that was really his thought. My assumption, because I don't know again, I'm not this guy, but is that because of the church thing, that the ideology of people were telling him, hey, well, you've been out saving the whales, we've been feeding the homeless, kind of a thing. You know what I mean? It's like, well, crap. I'm out there like getting at people's faces and stuff, and instead I could have just been feeding the homeless. And it's like, okay, well, let me ask you this: how many homeless are you going to feed when they can't live because the earth is uninhabitable? Then feeding the homeless means what to you? Because there's no homeless because they all died because they burned to death. Is that really going to help out, or should you go back to trying to do both, feed the people and save the environment? So yeah, so I think we're already seeing this flip of this drawing the line in the sand that I can't both save people and do good things for people and be pro-environment.
Maybe even getting a little more food and energy for people in the developing world, while at the same time constantly striving to reduce the negative impact caused by getting the food, energy, and material from the Earth's environment. Anyways, I could go on forever, but that's my story from the early years. Why did I leave Greenpeace after 15 years? When I began with Greenpeace, we had a strong humanitarian orientation to stop all-out nuclear war, to save civilization from destruction. By the time I left 15 years later, that's the peace in Greenpeace, of course. By the time I left 15 years later, Greenpeace had drifted into a position along with the rest of the movement as characterizing humans as the enemies of the earth. And that was not for me. We are part of nature and from nature. Greenpeace also began to adopt positions I didn't agree with from a scientific point of view. Ban chlorine worldwide.
Okay, so let's get one thing straight. Greenpeace didn't say people were the enemy of nature. They said some people were the enemies of nature. And those people are usually in control of the companies in the industry. Even if you could find me a quote where they say people are the enemy, that's never what they meant, because their actions demonstrate they didn't go out to grocery stores and start beating people randomly in the head with clubs saying, if you're not alive, then nature can thrive, or something like that. That's weird. I did like a little saying I didn't really mean to in a, rhymey way. Anyways, so that's never really been their message. Even, like I said, if you could find me a direct quote where they said that, that has never been the message through their action. Their action has been, we need to save the environment, and people who are the enemies, these specific people they're talking about, but it's definitely always been people. It's not been chimpanzees. It's not been tuna. It's not been snails. It's not been protozoans. It's people who are the enemy, just not all people. And there is a difference there that a lot of times gets muddied because we don't make enough of a distinction there. And we definitely should. I would definitely agree. We should make that distinction more clear. But that doesn't take away from the things they were doing, which prove the message they were trying to send. So it's a bit disingenuous where he's painting this broad brush with these guys because he's trying to get us to see the flip where he's like, I'm not against nature, I'm against hatred, and these people hate people, and I love people. So you could see where he's starting to paint this narrative. You look it up for yourself. There was definitely violence involved in Greenpeace, even way back in the day. And he's acting like, oh, no, then they became violent. No, they were always kind of violent, because sometimes the violence was necessary. They tried, at least most of them. There's always going to be a fringe. So, anybody's like, no, this one guy. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Or, no, it wasn't just one guy. Yeah, but it was this one group, like this zealot group, for sure. That's out there. Anybody who denies it doesn't know what the hell they're talking about, doesn't know what people, percentages, and a bell curve is. So, yeah, there is always violence. You can always find violence in any group, just any. But for the most part, if there was violence, it was usually like against a boat or against a machine. Like they were trying to stop the mechanisms that they were using to destroy the environment. They didn't really want to hurt the people involved. Although definitely there were some people they wouldn't mind hurting because they're the ones who were advocating for doing this. They weren't just the ones like they're doing their job, And we can argue whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. All right, big gust of wind again. But this guy again is mischaracterizing this whole movement by probably pointing to some of these fringe groups within this group that are doing more, not really violent in that they're trying to like bring machine guns and shoot the hell out of people, but they are doing things, especially some of those more fringe types, to blow up like an oil tanker or something like that. Which, yeah, that's not really the way to accomplish anything for sure. But the group as a whole was never about that. It was more about let's get in the way, and the violence usually came from the other side as they're trying to plow through. Like, for example, nowadays we have climate protesters that are like blocking main highways because they want to get noticed. I get it, you're getting noticed, but everybody's already talking about climate change. You're not adding to the conversation at all. Nobody's taking notice other than now they think you're dicks, and they're less likely to be sympathetic because you were a dick to them who just was trying to get to work that day, right? It's not a positive. It is a net negative in that. But I understand they're trying to get noticed. But they're just sitting there. The other people are plowing through them saying, hey, you can't stop me. It's a public road. I'm going to drive here anyways. The violence is not coming from their side, even though that protest ends up with violence. So again, this isn't a one size fits all, definitely. Never been any violence. They've never done it. Blah. That is not what I'm saying at all. There's definitely people in there who have done things. Definitely people who've done stupid things. But he isn't characterizing this group or that group. He's saying the whole movement. He's painting them all as this thing. So just keep that in mind.
Came one of the slogans. No matter how much I tried, it didn't matter that I was trying to convince them that chlorine is the most important element for public health and medicine, which it is. Adding it to drinking water is the big...
It is not. It is important in that it's one of the primary ways that we disinfect water. You use chlorine because it's poison. It's literally poison. It kills things, including us, by the way. We really need to find a better way to do it, even if the process includes but then removes the chlorine. That would probably be the best if we could, because yeah, doing something like, and the funny thing is this is the same kind of people who then say we want raw milk. It's just insane. But chlorine can be a way to clean and disinfect and get bacteria and stuff out of water. By the way, if you were to drink just drink a shot glass of chlorine, you'd be in some SOL, right? I don't know if you just die from that, but you would probably die from a shot glass of just pure chlorine. Chlorine is not good for you. Chlorine is not the best thing ever. It's not the better thing than medicine, like this guy is saying. I don't know what the hell he's talking about other than trying to make trying to get points in the favor of chlorine, apparently. Chlorine is not good. We use it for something that ends up being a positive thing, although there are other ways, but they're usually more expensive, that's always a no-no. We got to do things the cheap way, right? So I'm not trying to say, hey, all chlorine, get rid of it right this second, because unfortunately we have a system set up that at least some of that chlorine is necessary. Just like the fluoride in the water, if you use it to the percentages that are actually recommended, it can be helpful. Although there's definitely other ways to do it, but it can be helpful. But we're putting way, way too much of it in there, is what we're doing. And he's acting like this crap is practically antibiotics for your soul or your body and soul. So,
This advance in the history of public health, and 75% of our synthetic pharmaceuticals are chlorine-based chemistry. Anyways, I had to leave because of that. And here, look at them today in the Philippines.
I don't know if that's true, but I'd reckon to say that most medicines are actually carbon-based. I don't know that for sure, but carbon is an essential element for life. Most of our more complicated proteins and things built with proteins, amino acids, and all that stuff are usually built off of a carbon. Chlorine could be in there. And I don't know if it's 70% or not. I don't know where the hell. He's not showing his work, right? Show your work, dude. This number seems like something he pulled out of his ass, especially since it's a round number, which is like hardly ever true. But I would wager that it would be carbon, which is more prolific in medicine because it's more prolific in body and human chemistry of living things in general.
With a mask on in a parade, golden rice, which could help cure 2 million kids from dying each year, and they associate it with death in order to scare parents about something that can actually prevent their children.
I don't know what this golden rice thing is. If I remember, I'll try to look it up. But again, show your work, dude. I don't even know what this is.
From dying by the hundreds of thousands and millions every year. So that's where Greenpeace went, and I didn't want to go there. I'll just tell you about forests for 1 second because it's the most important thing, and it actually has a lot to do with climate. But wood is the most important renewable energy source in the world. It's the most important renewable material resource in the world. And it is the most important sequester of carbon in the world if you're concerned with that.
No, all of that's a lie. 100%. The most important carbon sequestration, I believe, is the water, like the oceans. They also produce the most. I've heard lots and lots of different figures from so many different places. It's hard to narrow down. One place I saw that I looked up was 80% of the oxygen that's made today is from phytoplankton. That was a phytoplankton, sorry. 80% of it generated from phytoplankton, not the forests. Forests are good. Don't get me wrong. It's like, F those forests. No, forests are, like all the parks are good. We shouldn't get rid of them, even if it's not a huge percentage. The also thing we need to talk about with the forest is you can't just replant a tree. You can't cut down almost 3,000-year-old redwood like I have here around me. Not here on the property, but I'm in the middle of the redwoods here. You can't cut down an almost 3,000-year-old redwood and plant 10 trees and have it be equal. It won't be equal in 10 years. It won't be equal in 100 years. That isn't how it works. So I don't know if he's going to talk about that kind of thing and reforestation being the thing, but I'm laying that out now ahead of time before he says any of that crap, because he does not know what the hell he's talking about.
And yet my old friends in Greenpeace are basically against forestry. In other words, opposed to the most important renewable resource in the world.
The most important renewable resource in the world is sunlight.
Using more wood. Many activists argue we should cut fewer trees and use less wood. But this is the correct environmental point of view. But look at what Greenpeace does to this. Here's what the IPCC says. They're actually correct on this, except it takes them 38 bureaucratic words to say it. In the long term, a sustainable forest management strategy aimed at maintaining or increasing forest carbon stocks, that's what they call trees, while producing an annual sustained yield of timber, fiber, or energy from the forest, will generate the largest sustained mitigation benefit, means the best thing to do. In other words, they're saying use trees instead of using steel and concrete wherever you can, and you will reduce energy consumption and you will be using something renewable. Greenpeace says, the IPCC says the easiest and cheapest way to fight climate change is to, quote, leave trees standing and protect its biodiversity, unquote. When I challenged this, the Greenpeace person said, oh, I didn't mean to put quotes around it, I was just paraphrasing. But that's a lie too. It isn't a paraphrase. What the IPCC is saying is grow more trees and use more wood. 6 words.
I have no idea what the hell he's talking about. I don't know where those quotes are from. I don't know what relation or context, because context is really important in these things. They could be talking about a very specific scenario, in which case they would say, yeah, trees are the most important in a particular scenario we're talking about. Like, I don't know. Pulled out of context, things can sound a whole lot like one thing instead of another. So I would have to pay enough attention to look those quotes up. I'm probably not going to. If somebody wants to do that work, throw it in the comments. I'd be happy to look it up and find out more about it.
Of course, there are many opinions about climate change. There is the IPCC, which says, sorry, well, how did that get there? That must have, wow, yeah, that got reversed in the translation there somehow. Read the second one first. You know it all. It's extremely likely that human influence has been the dominant cause of the observed warming since the mid-20th century. Extremely likely. Does it make it more likely to put the word extremely in front of likely? They say yes. They say that means 99%.
Okay, I'd have to agree that just using a colorful word like extremely, unless extremely is defined and it sounds like he's saying extremely has a sort of a definition, which is fine. I don't know why you don't just give the data. But this is talking to people who aren't interested in data points. So I understand, but I've always thought something like extremely and hugely, and it gets in the problem of power scaling, right? Okay, now you're a Saiyan, now you're a Super Saiyan, now you're a Super Saiyan 2, now you're a Super Saiyan, and it's just, give me a break. Just say 90%, whatever. And again, I get it that they're trying to talk to people who don't want data points, they're just bored of that. So it's just extremely likely. And like he said, he's literally telling you that extremely likely has a meaning, which is why they used it. But I do kind of agree that just using that term can be confusing and doesn't sound like it really means much.
Because very likely is 90%. And so they put percents along with adjectives that go with likely. What it turns out, actually, is that this is not a scientific word at all, likely. And even in the IPCC report, it says it's an expert judgment in the same paragraph as they say this extremely likely. An expert judgment is not a fact, it is an opinion.
By the way, I just want to point out that there's only one T in at all. It's not at tall. There's no extra T in there for tall. I'm just being a dick about it because he's bringing up this language and talking about this stuff. So I'm just going to bring up the Mr. on being strict on language. It said at tall, and there's no second T in all for tall.
This is an opinion, so let them have their opinion. But they should make it clear that it's an opinion. Sorry, back up here. Whoa. Okay, start over again. Anyways, this is what, wow, I got too far back, didn't I? There I go. This is what the Global Warming Petition Project, 31,000 scientists and professionals, all from the United States. This isn't even an international.
First off, saying that it's not an international thing doesn't make it more credible, it makes it less credible. I've never heard of Global Warming Petition Project. I would suspect that if I looked this up, that I might find that it's quite an ideological, right-wing leaning organization. I don't know who they are or anything about them. So quoting them, everybody knows the IPCC, this big international, organization. There's a ton of members there. Lots of people are going to say one thing or another thing, especially when not in a specific written, like this isn't the document necessarily they're giving out, but a member could say blah blahs as part of it, and it could be quoted as this is what the IPCC says. I don't know, but I do know that I never heard of this, so that makes me suspicious of anything you're about to quote for them. So I'm certainly not going to take it as quote unquote gospel, if you will, because you said these guys said that, which just happens to be exactly what you wanted to say, but isn't from the people you've just been quoting for all these other things that you're saying really kind of makes your point.
List. So much for your consensus. But I put my faith in the late Michael Crichton, who said, "I'm certain there's too much certainty in the world." And this is where this hubris comes in.
Okay, I don't know if he even said the quote about there's no convincing scientific evidence that human release of carbon dioxide will, in the foreseeable future, cause catastrophic heating of the Earth's atmosphere and disruption of Earth's climate. Because that was the Global Warming Petition Project. I don't know if he just skips that because he realized how stupid it was, or if he was saying it while I was busy talking and I just didn't understand. Let me know below. But yeah, so that's the part I was talking about, which just sounded dumb. Michael Crichton is, he was a good, I've never read his stuff. I'm not going to speak from firsthand experience. I know he was very popular. How about that? He was a very popular author. He's never once been a PhD that I know of. So taking anything that he has to say, other than anecdotally, just I'm not sure what he's even saying, other than that he thinks it's a kind of a silly little quote, but also somehow proves it's somehow proof, right? Just because the things he's saying seem to agree with the things that are being said, even though it's more ideological than point for point. If you know what I'm trying to say there.
This certainty that they are right comes in. And you cannot say you're certain that you're right when someone who's in authority is saying it's extremely likely. That isn't certainty. Anyways, we all know about the...
Before he moves on, let's just get this out of the way real quick. If we were to, let's just talk about me here for a second. If I was to put my amount of knowledge next to all of you, if I took a piece of paper, right, just a regular, what is it, 8.5 by 11, whatever piece of white paper, and I put, took a, a felt tip pen or something, made a little teeny dot, like as small a dot as I can make on there, and still make it like visible to the human eye. That's the amount of knowledge that I have in comparison to all of mankind, right? You might even have to shrink the dot, to be honest. You couldn't actually see it, but just so that you can get a picture of it in your mind's eye, like the almost smallest, faintest dot, and the rest of the piece of paper is all of mankind's knowledge. This is most people. Some people have a slightly, and I do mean slightly different, larger dot. Anybody who thinks they know everything about everything has no idea what they're talking about. And I'm not even talking about the scientific sciences and geology and like, well, this guy knows all about and great. Does he know what your mom had for dinner last night? You could say, who cares? That's frivolous, but it's still information. It's still knowledge. It's still part of, the whole being here on Earth. All of this stuff is information. It's all data points. It's all important to sort of weaving the how should I say, just knowledge. It's just simplify it and it's to say it's all knowledge, all right? Whether you think it's pertinent or not, that's a completely different discussion. But when I say all of human knowledge, I mean everything that's happened. And just to give you an example, a star out in space that has absolutely zero effect on us whatsoever. It's, how should I say? I don't want to say billions of light years because that doesn't even seem very far, to be honest, when you're in space. Let's just say it's on the fringes of the observable, universe. It probably won't be in the observable universe all that much longer because of expansion. That star has literally nothing to do with us. It never will. But we're still curious about what it is, how it got there, any processes. Like, we want to know about this thing that actually doesn't have relevance on us, right? That information could come in and be relevant to other things. Just like what your mom had for lunch yesterday. I don't remember if I said lunch or dinner, but it doesn't matter. What your mom had for lunch yesterday somehow could make its way into relevance into somebody's life. Somehow, some way, something about it can become relevant, and we won't know if we don't have that information, even as much as it seems unpertinent at the time. So I think the star example lets you know that yes, information is just information. It's what we do with it. And it may seem irrelevant at the time, but we can always find relevance when we need it. So when I say all of human knowledge, I mean all of it, not just do you know what chemistry is and then all about it and that kind of thing. There are plenty of people who know lots of that stuff, but still, the breadth of human knowledge is vast. Now, let's scale that up. Now, let's take that piece of paper and make that the teeny little dot. That dot now represents, and again, the scale is woefully inaccurate, but that now represents the knowledge of the universe compared to all of mankind's knowledge. Like, all together, not any one person, how smart they are. All of the knowledge we have all together. That's it. And let's even cut out phenomena, like what that star did. Let's just say understanding of stars in general, understanding of black holes, understanding of fundamental, just an understanding of the universe and not necessarily having knowledge of specific events like this particular star did this, as opposed to we know how stars work. Taking all of that out, your little dot doesn't really get any bigger when it comes to all the information in the universe. So, yeah, when he says we don't have certainty, therefore you can't say you know anything, he doesn't realize that the things that everybody knows everywhere is still so much less than all the information we don't have. Anybody who says they know something with certainty, sorry, they just don't know what they're talking about. I don't want to, be any meaner than that. That's as mean as I'm willing to get on that at this particular point. But yeah, he's getting on this certainty. It's the same thing that was the difference between, the law of gravity as opposed to the theory of relativity. This was arrogance that made us call these things laws back in the day, not because we knew things and now we don't know things as well. Why? Because it's just a theory. No, it's because we understand how little we know. So we're constantly evolving our understanding. So things become theories now instead of laws, not because they're not good enough to be laws. Anyway, that's enough of that. Let's get back on. That's just a stupid thing that he was saying. It was a stupid point he made.
Listen, from here I'm just going to show you what I show people, because you all mostly know this, but here's how I show it to people. First, yes, CO2 is increasing in the global atmosphere, but let's look at the last billion years of global climate change. I chose the most recent billion years. There is actually 3.5 more billion years of climate change before this, but we know pretty well that this is what has happened over the last billion. It's generally been warmer than it is today by many degrees Celsius. 22 degrees average global temperature has been the norm.
Once again, I believe I've said this in the last video, you would not want to exist when the Earth was first formed, and we could even just call it an Earth. The amount of heat giving off would probably vaporize any form of life on the planet instantaneously. And the billion years he's talking about, life existed. So it wasn't so bad that life couldn't exist, but at points in time on Earth, life couldn't exist. Just literally could not exist. So the fact that he's saying, hey, it's been hot before, does not mean making it hot now is okay, because even while life did exist, human beings would be dead during those times. It was inhospitable to people. We do not want that. Also, the Earth was very different when it was younger. The Earth is cooling. It's constantly cooled since it was first, created. There's lots of processes that the Earth went through that it will not go through again, not to the degree that it went through. We'll always have volcanic eruptions, but we won't have a time when almost all of the volcanoes are erupting all the time. We had times like that, or similar to that. Obviously not all, but huge amounts of volcanism happening simultaneously for long periods. I think there was one lava flow they said lasted like 1 million years or something like that. It's like just constantly pouring this stuff out. Things like that cause a lot of CO2 to go in the atmosphere. That's not going to happen again. The processes of both our sun, where our moon is now, the cycle of day and night, the circadian rhythm here on planet Earth, lots of things are in place that the things he's going to talk about and the processes that created these environments don't do that anymore. Not that they couldn't, and if they did, we would all be dead either way. So we shouldn't be like, hey, it's been like this, so it's cool, brah.
But then there have been 4.5 ice ages during this period of time where temperature plummets on average down to 12 degrees, even 10 degrees Celsius global average. Today, the global average temperature is 14.5 degrees Celsius. We are in an ice age called the Pleistocene. That's why both poles are covered in ice. People don't understand that we are in an ice age now. This is an interglacial period.
He just said it went down to like 10 Celsius. And now he's saying that 14 is the ice age. Make up your mind, dude. 1 degree Celsius is a really, really big deal. It's not like, well, the 10, 4, what's the big? It is a huge deal. If we were to go from this 14.5, he said, I don't know if that's true. I don't have any reason not to. I've heard the 14 before. It could be they were just simplifying and not putting the 0.5. But let's just say the 14 or 14.5 up by 4 degrees Celsius, we're talking about trying to keep it cool below 2. And he's saying if we have an increase of 4, no big deal, yo. That's what he's saying. Because, 4 degrees cooler, what's the big? That's not really the difference between an ice age and now. We're kind of in an ice age because we're 4 degrees Celsius away from the low ice age temperatures. Sorry, dude. Even 1 degree Celsius is a huge deal. 4 is a massive deal. So you're just kind of ho-humming that whole thing there.
Within the Pleistocene Ice Age, and it is generally a cold time in terms of the Earth's history. Why are there 300 million people in the United States and only 30 million people in Canada? One word: cold. Sometimes I think that's why you let us have it. And you saw this graph yesterday in a different format, but anyways, it's the most recent 600 million years since modern life emerged during the Cambrian explosion, and it shows very clearly that there's no lockstep correlation between CO2 and global temperature. At times, they seem to be moving in a similar direction. In other words,
Since you can't see, I just want to say that the chart is basically a ramp with a few dips here or there. That's basically going down from the time period he's talking about. The whole time, it gets lower and lower and lower. Again, there are a few spikes and dips here or there, but the general shape is down, and he's acting like it's just kind of been the way it's been since then. No, you can see by your own chart, it's going down.
there seems to be correlation sometimes, but as you know, correlation doesn't prove causation, and you'd need to see a lot more of a lockstep relationship. It seems that temperature is bounded on the top and the bottom, probably by a lot of feedback forces that...
Temperature is bound on the top and the bottom because that's the chart you gave us. You could have given us a bigger chart and then it wouldn't have been locked, or you could give us a smaller chart and it would go off the charts. Damn, that's stupid.
Are creating a maximum and minimum, and we're in one of those minimums right now. Yeah, it shows right there, for example, that now it's 14.5 C and CO2 is about 400, whereas the average over the last 600 million years has been around 2,000, which coincidentally is the optimum CO2 level for plant growth, about 4 to 5 times higher than it is today. That's why greenhouse growers...
If the oxygen level was 4 to 5 times what it is now, we would all die. And the atmosphere would probably catch fire. 4 to 5 times. We have, I believe, 20% oxygen. 5 times more oxygen is 100% oxygen in our atmosphere. We would die. I know they give people oxygen to breathe in their little masks and stuff to keep them alive. That's because they're not getting enough. Trust me, we do not want 100% oxygen. That's not a good thing. We need other things in our atmosphere. Forget just the even breathing part. Just the chemical makeup of our atmosphere would really ravage this entire planet if it was 100% oxygen like he's suggesting, 4 or 5 times more. I don't even know why he's even bringing this up. The other thing, just to point out real quick, he's saying that carbon and global warming do go hand in hand. It's in all of his argument here. The argument isn't, hey, carbon's in our atmosphere, it's bad and it's warming, but that's normal, whatever. The argument is carbon is in our atmosphere, that's bad, but also we are doing it. But even if we weren't doing it, this is still bad. So even if we take out the we are doing it part, even he's admitting, uh-oh, a lot of carbon, that's going to heat things up. He's trying to act as if it's not a bad thing, but we all know it's a bad thing. But even if we just go with man isn't doing it, it's still bad. I don't understand, dude. This is a bad thing.
Purposely put the exhaust from their gas or wood heaters into the greenhouse to increase growth by as much as 100%. So we can look forward to...
So just as a little side there, that would murder all their plants. A, you're putting a lot of heat, there's soot, there's smoke, there's a lot of really bad crap there. Can you put some carbon dioxide, especially if it's well vented, and some of your, yeah, man, plants love carbon dioxide. That can be good if you do it right. But he's trying to say, like, hey, man, smoke is good. Just shove it in your greenhouse. That's not how it works. You can't just fill your greenhouse full of smoke. It would kill all those plants.
Increasing productivity in agriculture from increased CO2, as many of you know. Now, this to me is the graph, if you accept this as true, which it probably is something like true, because it has been warming for the last 100 years or so. The IPCC
like
says that we've been the dominant cause since the mid-20th century. That's 1950. In other words, they do not ascribe the rise in temperature between 1910 and 1940, which you see there, to human.
That isn't what they said. They said the dominant cause. They did not say the only cause starting then. Get your facts straight.
Caused emissions, because we weren't emitting much back then. They only say it's the part between 1970 and the year 2000 that was caused by humans. Then what caused the rise in temperature between 1910 and 1940? Because it is identical in duration and size, 0.4 degrees over 30 years. They're both the same. It is not logical to be extremely likely that the second one is caused by us.
I have no idea. I'm looking at his chart. There's a couple little spikes, and they get to about 0.2, which is what we saw with the whole medieval Romanized warming period thing. They do not get to 2 or 1.5 in the chart that he's showing, with this big giant spikes going practically straight up, with little dips and rises here and there, absolutely. But it's not like, oh man, there's this equal thing over here. Well, what explains that with this equal? They are not, there's nothing equal. It's your chart, dude.
And the first one is caused by something else, which they don't really say what it is. So this to me demonstrates the logical fallacy of claiming that we are the dominant cause of global warming. Many of you have seen this. There has been no increase in global temperature for 17 years and 10 months and running. And then here is the United States for the last 10 years. The temperature has actually declined by a significant amount. And the polar vortex had something to do with this, I think. But no, I forgot, that was warming. That's right, yeah, I shouldn't make that mistake again. And here, of course, is the Arctic sea ice, which has right now is nearly 1 million square kilometers below its average since 1979, when we first started measuring it from a satellite. We have no idea what the extent of Arctic sea ice was before then, but somehow or other, Amundsen got through there with an 8-horsepower motor and a wooden boat in 1904. And the Canadian ship St. Roch got through there in 1942 or 4, both ways back and forth with a small engine, without a big icebreaker. So, what was it? Who knows what it was like back then during the heat wave of the 1930s into the 40s. And here, of course, is the Southern Ocean, where if you take the difference between the Antarctic and the Arctic, there is now nearly 1 million square miles more sea ice than the average since we started measuring it in 1979. And this is the sum total of our knowledge about sea ice. And apparently this is also due to global warming, the increasing extent of sea ice in the...
I really don't know what the hell he's talking about here, as far as, I should say, I don't know what his point is what I mean with what he's talking about here. He's trying to say that sea ice has been stable most of this time. And even in his chart at the very end there, and I don't know what time scale he's given, so it's hard to tell what period of time, but at the end, especially the bottom one, shows a spike kind of going, not as much as global warming is going up, but it's going up a bit. I don't know if he knows this, but this is literally the argument against what he's saying. The stability of sea ice is what's kept us from having a major global disaster. The fact that it's now shifting so much in temperature now, this is not a, oh, I guess it's starting. This is a, oh crap, red flag. This is like, one of those tipping points we don't want to reach. And his whole thing is like, but it's no big. It's been this way for, yeah, which is a good thing. It's going nuts now. It shouldn't go anywhere. It should always be the way that it was. It should be a kind of unreachable effect that we should have on this planet where we're not really affecting that in any significant way. It should always go up, down a little bit on its own. The fact that it's not doing that now is the problem. Not whether some dude on a boat was able to hack his way through some ice. And he's acting like these icebreakers are like magic. Like they had some sort of magic technology where they can get through the ice, where some dude in a boat couldn't do it. Like, dude, you got enough gumption, you can get through whatever you want. And it really depends on what route you take, what time, what area. Like, there's lots of factors in this. It's not just a one for one, analogy like he's acting. So again, I see what he's saying. I'm kind of confused as to what he's actually trying to communicate, other than see same old, which I guess is it. But the specific information he keeps bringing up doesn't really say anything about that, even though he's saying it does. That's like saying, see that dog over there? Global warming. Wait, what? You don't see? Yeah, I saw the global warming. What does that dog have to do with global warming? I'm just telling you, that dog, global warming. That's kind of what's happening here.
Antarctic, whereas the decreasing extent of sea ice in the Arctic is also due to global warming. So I get it. Everything is due to global warming.
You can tell
It's
what kind
funny,
of audience
but our children are not taught logic, they are not taught what the scientific method is, and they are taught that carbon is pollution. Oh, carbon dioxide, sorry. They're told it's carbon now, as if it was soot.
What the hell is it? Who's telling him this? And he slipped this little sly jab in. Like, oh, carbon. Aha, I'm kidding. It's carbon dioxide, but I'm saying it's just basic carbon, so I can sound like everybody's just nuts for thinking one of the basis of life is a dangerous thing. Why don't you look up carbon and see how important it is to life, and that'll change your mind. Jesus Christ, dude. Maybe he's talking about coal and burning coal, which is carbon. Maybe that's the association he's trying to make. Is everybody thinks coal is bad, but coal not bad, coal good. See? That's carbon, but everybody's saying carbon bad. Oh, carbon dioxide, whatever. It's the same, right? Okay, this is 16 minutes and 52 seconds in. We've got 29 minutes and 53 seconds. It's still sunny. I've still got plenty of power. So I'm going to stop this one here, and we'll do a part 2. I don't know if we'll be able, we'll be able to get through the rest of it. I don't know if we'll be able to do another one after that, but we'll stop this one here because we're running out of time on my device as far as the amount this program can record. Obviously, I've got a lot of editing to do on here, so we're just going to start again. We'll have a part 2. So for me, I'll see you in a minute because I'm going to start it right now. But for you guys, you'll probably see it in a week because that's usually how I set the release schedule. So I'll see you then.